Imagine being called a coward every single day for a year. Not once, not twice, every single day. Your brothers looking away when you walk past. Whispers following you like a shadow you can't shake. No trial, no defense, just the weight of a label you didn't earn, and absolutely no way to prove them wrong. That was Arisadmus, a Spartan warrior standing in a battle formation on a dusty Greek plain in 479 BC, hands trembling. Not from fear, but from fury that had been quietly burning inside him for 12 full months. He had been at Thermopylae. He had watched King Leonidas and 299 of his brothers make their last stand in that narrow mountain pass. He hadn't run. He had been sent away, ordered away, because of an eye infection, a medical condition he had no control over. But Sparta didn't care about reasons. Sparta cared about results, and the result, in their eyes, was that 300 men died, and Arisadmus came home breathing. Today, though, today was different, because standing across that field were 120,000 Persian soldiers, the single largest invasion force Greece had ever seen. And Arisadmus wasn't here for glory. He wasn't here for medals or monuments. He was here to pay a debt, a blood debt. And what happened next would become one of the most savage, most decisive battles in all of human history. A battle so brutal that Persian survivors spent the rest of their lives trying to erase it from their memory. To truly understand what drove the Spartans at Plataea, you have to go back 1 year, back to 480 BC, the year Greece bled. After Thermopylae, the Persian king Xerxes didn't just win a battle. He wanted to send a message. See, he marched his army straight to Athens, the heart of Greek civilization, and he didn't just occupy it. He burned it. The temples, the homes, the Parthenon, all of it reduced to ash and rubble. Greek citizens had evacuated onto ships and stood offshore watching smoke rise from the city they loved. And Xerxes? He sat on a throne on a hill and watched it burn, because he wanted them to see. He wanted them to understand, deep in their bones, that resistance was a waste of breath. But Xerxes made a mistake, a catastrophic, empire-ending mistake. He assumed that breaking Athens meant breaking Greece. So he left his most trusted general, Mardonius, with 120,000 soldiers to clean up what was left, and sailed back to Persia to celebrate. He wanted a victory parade. He wanted wine and praise and the satisfaction of a conquered enemy. He was going to get none of that. Because the Greeks didn't surrender. They regrouped. Athens, Sparta, Corinth, Megara, the city of Plataea itself, city-states that had spent generations fighting each other, sat down and formed an alliance. And the reason was simple. Persia had handed them something far more powerful than any treaty ever could. A common enemy, a shared wound, and a burning need for revenge that no political disagreement could extinguish. By the summer of 479 BC, the combined Greek army gathered near the city of Plataea. Over 110,000 men. The largest Greek force ever assembled in history. And at the tip of that spear, 10,000 Spartans in full battle armor. Red cloaks catching the wind. Bronze helmets gleaming. Lambda shields locked at their sides. They marched in formation, singing hymns to Ares, the god of war, and every single one of them had a face carved from stone. Leading them was Pausanias, nephew of Leonidas, the king who died at Thermopylae. Every morning, Pausanias woke up carrying the same image, his uncle's body, beheaded, crucified, put on display like a hunting trophy by Xerxes. He carried that image like armor. so did every Spartan behind him. Across the field, Mardonius watched them come, and he laughed. He'd seen Greeks before. He had watched them at Thermopylae, watched them scramble and retreat when the immortals pressed forward. These men, he thought, would fold just as easily. He had 120,000 soldiers. He had cavalry, elite infantry, fortified supply lines. He had every advantage on paper. What he didn't have was a clear understanding of what he was actually looking at. For 11 straight days, the two armies stared at each other across the Asopus River. Neither side charged. Mardonius tried every trick to bait the Greeks into attacking, sent his cavalry to cut off supply lines, poisoned water sources, left the bodies of killed Greek scouts in visible positions as a psychological weapon. He wanted them angry. He wanted them reckless. The Spartans didn't move. They stood in formation for hours, sometimes entire days, without flinching. While soldiers from other city-states shuffled and muttered and complained, Spartans were completely still, breathing slowly, watching. Their training had conditioned them for exactly this kind of disciplined waiting. It wasn't stubbornness. It was strategy. Mardonius grew frustrated. On the 11th night, he decided to force the issue. His plan: hit the Greek position at dawn with cavalry, and drive them into the open ground below, and then use his massive numerical advantage to surround and crush them completely. Pausanias saw it coming. Before dawn on the 12th day, he ordered a tactical retreat, a careful, controlled withdrawal to new defensive positions closer to the city of Plataea. In the darkness, the Greek army began to move, but movement in darkness is never clean. Units got separated. Pace varied. By the time the sun came up, the Greek formation, that disciplined, intimidating wall of soldiers, looked like a scattered, stumbling mob spread across open ground. Mardonius saw exactly what he'd been waiting for. He ordered a full charge. 120,000 Persian soldiers surged forward. Now, here's where most people think the story ends. Because the Greek center and left wing, seeing that wave coming, didn't hold. They ran. Not in formation, not in good order. They fled toward the walls of Plataea, and Mardonius grinned from his horse because this, right here, looked exactly like every other Greek collapse he'd ever seen. He threw everything he had into chasing them, and in doing so, he forgot about the Spartans. The 10,000 Spartans on the right wing had not moved. They stood in formation on a low ridge, shields locked, spears level, watching, waiting. Because what Mardonius thought was a collapse was a trap. The retreating Greeks weren't fleeing in panic. They were pulling his army out of position, drawing his forces away, stretching them across the entire plain, breaking the compact strength of 120,000 soldiers into disconnected, scattered groups, chasing enemies in every direction. By the time Mardonius understood this, it was too late to change anything. The Persian cavalry reached the Spartans first. 5,000 mounted warriors in scale armor, carrying composite bows and curved blades, riders who had broken Greek infantry formations across a dozen different campaigns. They charged, a wave of horses and iron and screaming men. Arrows came down in sheets. Men fell with shafts through their necks, through gaps in their helmets, through the spaces between bronze plates. And every time a Spartan dropped, the man beside him stepped forward and closed the gap without a word. The line didn't break. It didn't waver. It breathed. The cavalry commander, a Persian noble named Mecistius, riding an armored warhorse and wearing a golden breastplate beneath his robes, decided to lead the next charge himself. His horse crashed into the Spartan front line. Spears came up. The horse screamed and went down. Mecistius was thrown forward and hit the ground in full armor, tried to scramble to his feet. 50 Spartans surrounded him instantly. Here's the detail that tells you everything about what kind of soldiers these were. The golden breastplate was too thick for spear points to penetrate. So a Spartan dropped to one knee, angled his spear upward, and drove it clean through the eye-hole of Mecistius's helmet. The Persian cavalry commander died face down in the mud, while Spartans stood over him in complete silence. When the cavalry saw their commander fall, they pulled back. They circled at a distance and sent word back to Mardonius. And Mardonius, furious now, sent in the Immortals. The Immortals were the crown jewel of the Persian military. 10,000 elite warriors, and so named because whenever one fell in battle, another was immediately brought forward to fill the gap. Their ranks supposedly never diminished. They were Persia's statement to the world that some forces simply cannot be stopped. At Thermopylae, they had contributed to killing 300 Spartans in a narrow mountain pass. Today, they would face those same Spartans on open, flat ground. Equal numbers. No terrain advantages, no choke points. Just Spartan training against Persian reputation. The Immortals advanced in loose formation, moving fast, relying on speed and aggression, the way they always had. They carried shorter spears than the Greeks, lighter shields made of wicker and leather, scale armor designed for mobility, not for absorbing punishment. The Spartans locked their shields together, bronze overlapping bronze, forming a wall nearly 3 meters high. Behind it, spears projected outward like the quills of some enormous animal. There was no gap, no weakness, no invitation. The Immortals hit that wall at a full run. Wicker shields shattered on contact. Persian spears were too short to reach the men standing behind Spartan bronze. But Spartan spears, 2 meters of hardwood tipped with iron, punched through scale armor the way a fist goes through paper. The front rank of Immortals died in seconds. The second rank climbed over the bodies and died just as fast. The third rank slowed, hesitated. The Spartans took one step forward, together, shields still locked. The Persian line buckled backward. Mardonius screamed orders. More Immortals pushed forward, and the pressure became so extreme that men in the front were crushed against the shield wall by the weight of soldiers behind them. Ribs cracked under the compression. Lungs gave out. Men died standing up, held in place by the press of bodies around them, unable to fall. And Spartan spears continued rising and falling, methodical, controlled. Every thrust aimed at an unprotected spot, throat, face, groin, armpit, no wild swings, no wasted motion. This was not combat in any romantic sense. This was industrial-scale killing, refined through decades of training into something almost mechanical. Then Mardonius made his final and fatal mistake. Seeing his army beginning to break, he personally charged into the heart of the fighting on a white horse, gold-trimmed armor catching the sun, trying to rally his men through sheer personal courage. It was brave. It was also the last thing he ever did. A Spartan warrior in the front rank saw him, saw the white horse, the golden armor, the towering helmet, and threw his spear. It struck Mardonius in the head. He was dead before his body hit the ground. When the Immortals saw their general fall, they did something no one had ever seen them do before. They ran. And when 120,000 Persian soldiers watched the Immortals, fleeing from a Spartan line, something inside the Persian army simply broke. Panic doesn't spread slowly in a battle. It moves like fire through dry grass. Within minutes, the entire Persian force was streaming backward toward their fortified camp. A massive, heavily built enclosure of wooden walls and watchtowers that Mardonius had constructed as a final refuge. They thought the walls would save them. The Spartans chased them at a run. The first Persians through the gates were immediately followed by hundreds more, men shoving and trampling each other to get inside, the wounded left to be crushed underfoot. And right behind them came the Spartans, who hit those wooden walls without slowing down. They used their shields as rams. They tore planks apart. They climbed over the top and dropped inside. And once they were in, the fight became a massacre. Persians packed together with no room to form lines, no room for cavalry, no room to maneuver. Spartans moved through them in tight formation, still locked together, still thrusting forward in the same controlled rhythm. The rest of the Greek army arrived and poured through the breaches. Athenians, Corinthians, Megarians, every city-state that had watched Persia burn their homes and desecrate their temples came forward now to settle accounts. The Persians fought back with everything they had left, throwing stones, shooting arrows until there were no arrows, fighting with cooking knives and bare hands in pure desperation. It didn't matter. The Greeks just kept coming, relentless, unmovable, completely without mercy. When it was over, Herodotus recorded the numbers. Of the 120,000 Persian soldiers who had marched onto that plain, only 43,000 escaped. 77,000 were killed. Not defeated, killed. And among the dead were every single immortal who had advanced on the Spartan line. The unit that was never supposed to diminish had been completely and utterly annihilated. It would take Persia decades to even attempt rebuilding them. After Plataea, Persia never invaded Greece again. Not the following decade, not a generation later. Never. The empire that had conquered Egypt, Babylon, and half the known world turned around and went home. Because 10,000 Spartans had written a lesson in blood so clear that no Persian king ever wanted to read it twice. And Arisadmus, the man they called a coward, fought in the front rank through all of it. Herodotus tells us he fought like a man possessed, taking risks no rational soldier would take, throwing himself into the worst of the fighting over and over again. He didn't survive the battle, but he died without a single whisper following him. There's something in that story that goes beyond ancient history. Because every generation produces people who carry the weight of unfair labels, who live under the shadow of a moment they never deserved. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, the world gives them a single moment to answer back. Arisadmus used his. So did Pausanias. So did 10,000 Spartans who refused to let Thermopylae be the last word. Plataea wasn't just a battle. It was a reply. A final, devastating, unanswerable reply to everyone who thought killing 300 warriors meant killing what they stood for.